Hello, good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining today's session on Edtech with our fellow speaker and us from INSEAD. And today we have a wonderful selection of panelists. We have Jerome from Revisely, we have Julian from Anywise, and we have Yomna from Sama, and also me from INSEAD as a moderator. Today's session will address some important and burning questions that a lot of us have on the edtech industry, including the demand, the supply, the solution, the value add, and what different organizations in our society can contribute to a better education for the future. So first, I will start with a quick introduction of myself. I am Libin Wang. I'm a current MBA student at INSEAD. And with a passion for education, I spent the summer interning with an edtech startup in Europe and also led a team to participate summer startup program that interviewing startup in Europe and also VC and investors covering educations for adults, professional services, and also for lifelong learning. And now I'll pass on to our fellow speaker to give an introduction of themselves and also the organization they're working on. So first, I'll start with Jerome. Hi, Jerome. Do you mind start with your introduction?
Hi, Leon. Thank you. And good afternoon to all of you. And thank you to INSEAD for hosting this discussion. So my name is Jerome Fransen. I'm the founder of Revisely, together with former Minister of Education, Jo Ritsen of the Netherlands. And at Revisely, we reduce teacher shortages by reducing teachers' workload, while at the same time we give more feedback to students with better feedback on their documents. My background is in AI and NLP, but I do believe that technology that can be really useful in creating more equity in education. At the same time, I don't believe that technology is a goal by itself, and we have to keep our eyes on the end goal, which is improving education and opportunities for education. And one of my slogans, therefore, it's a bit naff, but I always say better to apply real intelligence than artificial intelligence in some cases. Thank you. Oh, your microphone is off now.
Yeah, thank you for pointing out. Thank you very much, Jerome. And Yomna, do you want to go next for your introduction?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me. I'm super excited to be here. So my name is Yomna, and I'm an INSEAD alum, 17D. So prior to launching Sama, I worked in the toy and media industry at companies such as Publicis and the Lego Group. I created Sama after understanding the extent to which it can be challenging for working parents to navigate those crucial early years of their child's development. And Sama is an online platform for working parents of preschoolers. So the idea is to give them all the tools and resources to foster independent play. And our mission is to help parents create a home environment that nurture their child's intellectual curiosity, creativity, critical thinking while they navigate their active lives as parents, as professionals. And a personal fun fact, I love learning through play and I love building Lego sets.
Great, that's interesting to know. Thank you for sharing. Lastly, we'd like to go to Julian. Hello, Julian. Do you want to give an introduction of yourself and your...
Thank you. So my name is Julian. I'm the founder of Anywise. We're helping people learn via bite-sized audio fragments. So for example, if you're a student, you can, instead of spending all your days in the library and feeling horrible because of it, take a nice sunny walk outside or go to the gym and still learn via bite-sized audio fragments, which are actually made for your brain to remember. I started the company 2 years ago because I was seeing too many friends going into burnout, stress. I had difficulty reading myself 5 years ago, like my brain dysfunctioned. So I then started learning via audio and saw great potential there to actually, to make learning a bit more fit for the 21st century. And that's what we've been doing so far.
Thank you very much, Julian. With that, I am going to kickstart with our panel discussion today. So the first topic that we have in mind, before we go into discussion, I would like to remind all of us about the webinar etiquette. So for all the audience, please stay muted and turn your video off. Chat box is disabled, but during the Q&A session, you will have the chance to submit your questions, and we will be presenting your questions to the fellow panelists. And lastly, the webinar is being recorded, so just keep in mind that this is a recorded session, and we will start from there. Great, so jumping into our first topic, it's the gap in education. So I remember during the summer when I was interviewing founders, VCs, and people working in the education space, there was a lot of discussion about education has been a traditional industry for a long time, and technology has just started to break in and see some innovation going on. And there was definitely gap between the demand and supply. There's also a lot of discussion about gap in education between developing economies and the developed economies. And lastly, there was also a lot of discussion about there's a lot of innovation around children. However, for the adults and then the more elderly people, the investment on educations are still quite less. So I would like to throw the question to our fellow panelists. Have you seen gaps in education in your own entrepreneurship journey? And if so, what does gap in education mean? And how do you see this gap can be closed through your effort and also society as a whole? Maybe I'll first start with Yamna.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, to your point, when it comes down to early childhood development, there's a lot that's been created so far to help, develop the child along different aspects, like from physical to digital experiences. There's a wealth of toys, games, activities, classes for preschoolers, for example. However, it became clear how hard and stressful it can get for working parents to navigate through it all, like while managing their active lives. So this is what encouraged us to leverage technology in the specific case to provide parents with greater control, creation, and new frameworks in this landscape.
Definitely, and I see, there is definitely a need for technology to help parents better engage their children with learning, and also there is definitely a growing need to help parents to balancing their own professional work and also educating their next generations. Thank you. And curious about Jerome, what's your thought on the gap of education?
Yeah, for me, I always zoom in on this one bit of the gap in education, which is that not all kids get access to the same quality education. And you already mentioned one aspect, which is that in some developing countries, the access is not so good, and in developed countries, it's better. But even within those countries, it's often very dependent on where you live. Like if you live in big cities, even in developed countries, sometimes education is not as easy to get as in some other areas. And sometimes it's the rural areas that are underserved, right? In that sense. I always visualize it with I'm Dutch, but I'm married to a Spanish woman, and my mother-in-law, when she grew up in Franco's time in Spain, she had no access to hardly any education. So she finished primary school, but she's still not able to read everything, and it puts her at such a disadvantage in not only in the labor market. I mean, it limits your choices, when you have to choose the type of labor and type of work, but it also puts you at a disadvantage in society, right? Like simple things, internet banking is a real big task for her. Like I see her struggle with that, and I see how she feels excluded thanks to that. So for me, it's also, it's not very abstract anymore for me. Like the gap in education really means that you can't participate fully in the labor market, but also not in society. And it's caused by sometimes budget priorities. So for example, in Franco's time, there was a choice not to educate everyone, but sometimes it's also negligence, ignorance, too many other stuff that has to be done in a society.
Yeah, definitely. And then I think you mentioned a couple of points. One is maybe awareness of need of education. Some people just don't aware that they need education. And then second is, some education tools are not available in certain languages that are, less spoken, like English is spoken languages. But if we're speaking for other languages as spoken by a smaller population, the resources might be limited. And also around topics where you said like financial education, which is super important for a lot of people, but it's not necessarily the first topic that people will think in mind about education. So these are also different aspects of the problems or the issue that contribute to the gap of education. So yeah, thanks for sharing.
Definitely. Yeah.
Yeah. And lastly, Julian, what's your thought there? And maybe if you can briefly talk about like your definition of gap of education, and how do you think you can address the gap through your organizations and also maybe other society participants. That would be great.
So I have a great difficulty with defining the gap in education because it's so broad. So I don't have a definite answer on that. Like I couldn't pinpoint like what's the biggest gap in education. Like there are millions. It's poverty, it's access to education in general. And I think a lot of people are trying to solve it, but there's miles and miles still to, marathons of miles still to win. What we're trying to solve is tackles a little bit of like the different fields. So first of all, we're trying to fix that the very illogical thing which is happening now in the world is that 1 on 10 persons in the world have dyslexia, which just causes your brain to not be able to read that well, which is fine. Like we've been auditory learners for like most of human, like all human history. Reading has only been for the past couple of thousand years. So it makes sense to learn from stories, and that's how we all survived. But the current educational system, only you're smart if you actually can read a book within 2 days and memorize everything, which is complete nonsense. So what we're trying to do is to have all those people who are now literally, that's what we get from feedback, like that they feel stupid now because the educational system is just not a fit for them, because their brain just functions differently. They can't perceive information that well by reading, to give them the freedom to learn via audio. And we are very much focused on giving the same experience you would if you would read a book via audio. So a format would actually make sure your brain remembers, really taking audio as a serious learning method instead of just only having it as a good to have. If the rain is too loud on the background, please give me a note, because I'm noticing that it's terror outside. But so that's what we're trying to fix. And in the meanwhile, I think education shouldn't be a static thing you need to do behind your laptop. And not a good example that I'm taking this call all like sitting in the chair. But I think we should enable people to take care of your mental and physical health and learn at the same time. And that's what we're trying to do via audio, so that you can, sitting is the new smoking. Let's not bring that into the new generation. So for your first question, I don't have an answer at all to the gap in education, because it's so big. We're trying to tackle small things which we can do.
Definitely. Yeah. Thank you very much, Julian. I think from your response, I took out kind of two pain points or issues that you're trying to solve. One is the time, like you said, reading a book, acquiring knowledge in traditional ways are so time consuming. And in an age of information explosion that we're all living today, it's just impossible to consume everything using the traditional method. So that is also create an opportunity for a tech company to innovate there. And then the second is you talk about different individuals have different needs or different habits of learning. Like some people might be learning well through listening, other people might learn better through graphic, visual, etc. So addressing those individuality and different ways that students' individual needs better is also, I think, very interesting perspective through to address gap of education. It is also about like how to help individuals find the best way that they can learn most efficiently and most fastest in today's world of information.
And I think lastly, like I think it's super important for education in general to look how the future will look like. So for example, TikTok has the best algorithm in the world, like the world has ever seen, keeps people on the platform with consumer like information, and our brains get used to then having very small bites of information and very small attention spans. Like if education doesn't go along with that, it's very unrealistic to think that it will uphold people their attention in the future to actually learn.
Great. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. And next, I would like to maybe ask another question specifically on the technology, because we keep talking about edtech, like how technology can enable educators, let alone their parents, teachers, or other people to help the public learn better. So the question for the panelists is, in your mind, how do you think technology has helped education? And more specifically, do you like in which area do you think technology can be most effective in elevating the educational experience? I remember, Jerome, you mentioned the AI machine learning as some of your expertise in the past. Maybe I can start with you and you can talk about how those cutting edge technology are adapted to education. How do you think they can actually change what we learn today? What we learn, how we learn today?
Yeah, interesting question. It's super broad, so we can we could be talking about this for hours. I think that one of the opportunities that technology has given us is around communication. So one very basic thing that technology, maybe not specifically educational technology, but technology in itself has given us the possibility to do things like we're doing right now, right? I'm learning from you guys. I hope to be learning from the audience. This is an exchange that is taking place worldwide through communication technology, and it's not necessarily educational technology, it's just communication. So that's a really enriching one that we sometimes forget. I think another one is that technology has already proven that a lot of content can be made more interactive. That's not really my special area, but I think that's one of the wonderful things that can be done around the content that is so static right now sometimes, even today, even in 2022. Learning paths can be more personalized. That's something that Julian already touched upon. Like if you have a certain way of learning and you need a different learning path, and that can be accommodated for by using certain technologies. Myself, I'm more focused on a bit on the indirect side. So Revisely, we try to reduce teachers' workload. And we think that's also a way of freeing up teachers for the tasks where they add the most value, right? Like really preparing lessons, being with the students, coaching them, and helping them learn and make the most of their talent. And so that's where we really zoom in. So we focused on the task of grading, which is like 15-20% of teachers' task. And we try to reduce that task by providing a tool, but we also help them to outsource grading to external professionals. And so we do that through technology. We have a tool, we have a platform, and like an outsourcing platform.
Mm-hmm.
But that's how you can. Those are different ways that you can use technology in education, and use edtech, I would say.
Great. Yeah, thank you very much. And so you mentioned about, leveraging technology to free up teachers' time so that they can focus on their own value-added activity and spend less time on routine works, for example, grading maybe 200 papers or doing like things repeatedly. So I think, as you said, that definitely technology can play a bigger role of freeing up people's time and enhance value creations in education.
Yeah, just to add to that, I think one of the biggest gaps in education is due to the lack of teachers or teacher shortages in different areas. So if as a child you don't have access to somebody who's teaching you, which can be, it can be part of your family, of course, but normally it's some sort of schooling, and in some areas they don't have that, or they don't have enough of it, or enough qualified. So that's why we're focusing so much on the teachers.
Right. Yeah, that's a very important point to address. So with technology, probably like we can scale up high quality teaching resources to more people. Like in the past, probably a teacher can only teach a limited number of students, but with technology dealing with some of the routine work, now a good teacher can really project he or her personality to maybe hundreds or thousands of students, so more students can have access to great educational resources, and then the teacher can empower more people through technology, through like internet, through also automated tools. Great. So I have a question for Yoma regarding to technology. Yoma, feel free to share your thoughts on technology, how technology enables education, and more specifically, because you touch upon that your companies focus on creating better experience for children to learn. So I'm curious specifically about how do you measure outcomes of education? Because a lot of people asking about yes, cool. But how do I measure it? Is there any quantified way to see the outcome? So if you can talk about that, that would be really great.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. And I think, essentially when it comes down to technology itself, there's a lot of things out there, right? So there's an abundance of information presented to ourselves on a regular basis, let alone if it's like online or offline, from word of mouth. So if you think about parents in this specific new landscape, just trying to make sense of everything that's made available to them, it can be quite overwhelming. They're always like, where's this handbook that's going to tell me all of a sudden like how to take care of my child as a new parent? And it's really about just trying to revisit what parenthood could look like in this modern world, and how to enable parents to find this balance that is possible in this crazy environment that's asking a lot of you, especially that when you hear intel around like the effect of stress and mental well-being, not only on the parent but on the child itself. So it's really about you want to do good by your child, and then you learn that you want to do all of these things and you get stressed about it because you're not sure if you're doing the right thing, and then all of a sudden you read in like research saying that stress and how it affects the child. So like you're in this vicious cycle that's just you're never sure what to do, and even you being stressed affects your child in the longer run. So you're just like trying to navigate through all of that. And I do believe that technology presents the opportunity to give you that balance, to filter out a bit like of that clutter and help you focus on certain things more than others. Now, in our specific case, and going back to your question about how to measure that or how to enable that in a more personal way, the key is leveraging interests. So the idea is that independent play, for example, in our case, which is what we're trying to enable, is all about capitalizing on family interests, on shared interests, on the child's interests, because it is an opportunity for you to build on that when you're together, and then it gives you room to grow even when you're apart. So the idea is to try to enable that through curated content, activity suggestions, and tools that would enable you to get a sense of progress. Because in the end, in education or in technology, there's this opportunity of like tools and data and insights. But in our case, it's very tricky because it's relative. We can't commit to like an average and be like, this is, you know, what you should aspire towards. It's all about this sense of progress. And the beauty with independent play is that it's catered around your time, your play time, the time that you spend by yourself. And so what we want to enable you is get the tools to know which activities your child is spending more by themselves. What's, you know, that day they spend, you know, 3 minutes, the next day they spend 5 minutes. And I'm using these like little numbers because usually the attention span of a child at that age is quite low. So it's so you need to start somewhere and then go from there. And between the curated activities and the tools that we provide, it's all about just providing you with that visibility and that sense of progression and those wins, no matter how small they could look at the beginning, and just empower you over time through the guidance, through the comics that we're delivering, and through the way we're sharing that information to make parents feel more comfortable and empowered in that journey. And that's something that's super important and powerful. And that's what technology allows us to do.
Yeah, thank you very much. And I think I really resonate with you on, you know, the analytics and data aspect of technology, because I would imagine when a parent interact with a child and then child's like doing many things in a very short period of time. So the parents might be lost on what really is the child's interest and what can be improved. So through, you know, technology and you know, tracking and analytics, it might give parents a better picture of what their child is doing and what's their interest like, and if they want to change certain behaviors or guide the child to do something different in the future, they already have you know, a source of truth to go for.
Absolutely. And I think what's really important here as well is the sense of relativity to yourself. Similar to how you think about now with, you know, in healthcare or with wearable technology, for example, it's about the sense of self and progress vis-a-vis yourself, not necessarily in comparison to others. Now, I know that there are some where it's more about this competitive aspect of where am I, where do I stand in the bigger scheme of things. But what's really important to reiterate here is the idea of where you are today and where you want to be, and just celebrating that as it progresses, and just being mindful that in sometimes it might not be the case. You're going to have days when things are not going as planned. And it's about just putting these things into perspective and just feeling that you can, you know, start again and pick up from where you are. And that's what we really want to also encourage through the content that we provide. And as the other panelists are also highlighting, there is this part around the way content is being curated and communicated. And what we've done is we've created this neighborhood, so this virtual neighborhood of characters that represent the newer modern neighborhood, working parents, dual career couples, hybrid workers, parents that, you know, single parenthoods. So it's really important for us to really represent that in the way we share content, share different stories, and provide practical ways of addressing them, because it's not a one size fits all, and social media and can be quite intimidating when it comes to that.
Yep. Thank you very much, Yoma, for sharing that. And talking about one size does not fit all, and it, you know, segues into what I was curious about, Julian, your startup, because you mentioned that your startup focuses on addressing different learning needs. For example, people have like disabilities or certain different attention span and etc. And how do you think through leveraging technology you can address so many different diversity in learning habits? And if you can share a little bit about how you create your solution to better fit those individual different needs, I think it will be highly appreciated to both me and the fellow audience.
So first of all, really great that like what you just told for the last part, Yuma. Like that was very interesting. Like interesting line of thinking that you set up the digital neighborhoods like that. But to get back to the question, I think for us it's so we do different things, right? So we work with institutions. So we work with universities, applied science universities, probably governments soon, to enable the teachers or the people who are providing the educational content to put it very easily within a bite-sized audio learning fragment. We have our own AI for that. You type in all keywords, or you put in like all kinds of raw material, 40 pages. It summarizes it into our format, and then it gets taped by the best voices, and then people can learn from it. But to get back to the question of how you like individualize it the best way possible. So what we're aiming at is to build something which provides the first and true learning experience via audio. So people, for example, they log in on the platform, you get a couple of questions, and via those questions, your own learning, the best way of learning for you is determined. So if you have ADHD, it will be less attention span. If you have dyslexia, it will be in addition with some special ways of reading. If you don't have ADHD or dyslexia, but have difficulty with someone else, which we can, with something else, which we can like determine in the questions that it's all fit perfectly for you. And that will determine how you get your learning journey. So are there fragments of 5, 10, 20 minutes? The attention span of a Gen Z actually is 8 seconds now. So we need to keep stuff short, also for the future, if we actually want to educate people in the way they like it. So we're building a thing in how it will be for like, so we're like segmenting it. First, it's all like, or like people with dyslexia on one big pile, which doesn't make sense at all, of course, but that's the way how we're like first doing it, and then segmenting it further and further and further towards an individual level where every person on earth can just log into the platform and get their own personal learning experience via audio. Does that answer the question?
It does. Yeah, thank you very much. I think you kind of touched upon how you create the solution to cater to different needs of the students, and I think it's also very important that you actually identify those differences in needs and using technology to address those problems, which people in the traditional learning environment might be. It might be hard for teacher to really acknowledge differences in students, especially like people have ADHDs and dyslexia and etc. But I think you recognize these differences and then you create a solution to actively address these issues, and it's already powered by technology, and it's already highly impactful in that sense.
And then for your data preference, so what we also do is that we track how, like, what fragments are listened most, where do people stop, how do they stop, like do they reverse it, like certain topics, so we can get a perfect overview of the hardest topics, so the teacher also knows where they should improve. So for example, if a teacher for a course of economics, they know like certain topics are really difficult. They also see that in results always, but they have no clue like where the specific difficulties are. If you can pinpoint that, you bring up the entire educational level of that teacher, but also of the course and of the university.
I see. So it creates also better feedback loop for the teachers to understand how they can behave better, how they can improve to address students' needs and help students to achieve better results. Yeah, great. Thank you very much. And yeah, so I guess like what I take away from the panelists' answer was, first, technology itself is already create more access for education to a wider populations. So one teacher can augment their ability to more and more students through the venue of technology, and also technology creates opportunity for customizations. As Julian, you mentioned, we can look into smaller group and address individuals' needs more accurately than before. And lastly, technology creates opportunity to have more accurate feedback loop and also behavioral data tracking. So sometimes we might not be aware of different little things that happens in learning, but through technology, there's accurate data to serve as a source of truth to help both learner and also teachers and parents to make the whole experience better. So great. Given the sense of time, I would like to move on to talk about education industry as a whole. So a lot of people have been saying that we've seen technology disrupting other industry, for example, commerce, food, transportation, but it seems like education technology revolution is still a bit slow comparing to other industries. So in your sense, what is the hardest part for education to play a bigger role? What are some of the roadblocks or challenges that you face in promoting education, edtech in the space of education? Maybe you can speak from different segments. Maybe Yoma, since you deal with more like children and child learning, you can speak more about the preschool level. And Jerome, you can address some of the problem that you've seen in your startup. And then Julian, you can talk about maybe some university or more mature learning from your experience. And yeah, I would maybe start with Yoma from your your startup and your experience working with children.
Absolutely. So in our case, I mean, there's quite a few reasons that could explain why it has been hard for edtech to infiltrate the education industry. Some of the more pressing ones, or the ones that came to our attention further, is around the fact that our users, and predominantly in our case, our parents, have a very busy life as a starting point. They don't have, they have active lives, little headspace, like limited headspace. There's no room for fancy apps, right? It needs to be something that's super convenient, that gets plugged into your life, and you can just, already start using it. It's not, requiring a lot of onboarding and adoption and learning, and in order to facilitate your everyday life. It needs to be very seamless and convenient. So that's one of the first bigger things that we've noticed. The second thing is that parents, especially when it comes down to their kids, can get quite risk averse, right? They want the best for their kids. They doubt themselves enough, they're not sure what to do and whether they're doing enough. So trusting the solution and what it can help them achieve is very important. So they need to rely on solutions they want to rely on solutions that have proven themselves. And this takes time and validation and traction and progress. Word of mouth is quite critical in this specific instance. So so it's very important to be mindful of these things. Even when it comes down to it, they can, if you take education, some of the things that they're being presented are using screen, for example. And especially when it comes down to your kids that are, less than 5 years old, screen time is an enemy in a lot of situations. So it's very important to be mindful of that and provide a bigger breadth of solutions and activities, because edtech often resonates with like gaming and interactivity in that sense. And what we need to think about when it comes down to the solutions that we deliver to parents with children that age is that it needs to be mindful of the kinds of activities and has that diversity between physical, digital experiences, and leveraging technology as an enabler for greater curation and monitoring and progress, rather than just the learning mechanism, the purely learning mechanism itself. So yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much, Yoma. Now I'll move on to Jerome. So hi, Jerome. So what's your thought on the challenges that education industry face on moving forward and embracing more innovative solutions?
Yeah, so I think there's a bit of overlap within all of education. I recognize a lot of points that Yumna made. It's a lot about trust, right? And in the case of your case, it's more about gaining the trust of parents. But if you are in the K-12 or also in the university space, you have to gain the trust of teachers, students, parents, school management, local, regional, and national governments, and all of those actors and stakeholders in the space need to be convinced before sometimes something gets accepted, and that sort of that causes a really long sales cycle for. If I'm trying to sell my solution to a school, it takes a really long time for all those levels to be convinced, which makes the sales cycle long, and that sort of is one of the reasons that, for example, there's also not so much investment in the space. So even though education is one of the biggest sectors, if you just look at it economically, it's one of the biggest sectors in the world in each country. Like it's usually the second or third budget in a country, and at the same time, Edtech, so the technology startups and scale-ups in that space are nowhere near the fintech or the other tech startups, right? And that's there's a long sales cycle. There's a time to profitability that is a bit longer. Investors sometimes don't take the time to understand the space and really understand all the stakeholders and the game that needs to be played. So there's a lot of financing that is also involved. And one of the other things that is that you also mentioned is like in our case, it's the parents that are overloaded already. They don't have much headspace for new stuff. Same goes for teachers, right? Like teachers are already overworked. And if you come to them with something new, we don't always realize it as tech companies, but it comes on top of all the other stuff that they're already doing. And very rarely do we help them to reduce their workload in the end. A lot of us say to the teacher, if you use my tool, you can teach so much, the teaching is going to be so much nicer for the students, or the end results are going to be better, or something, or it's going to be richer, or you're going to be have more insights. But it all means more investment in time upfront by the teacher. So we sometimes forget about that. And there's some. Lastly, I think tenders don't help. A lot of selling is going through tenders, so that's a complicating factor. And there's a lot of large publishers and distributors that have vested interests, and they have sort of a grip on a lot of the markets. Those are all factors that help, that sort of explain why we are not as big as other tech industries.
Yeah, I can definitely echo on investments, because I remember a conversation I had with the founder in Vietnam, and seems like they have a great solution, but one of the challenges they mentioned is their lack of funding. The government don't have money to invest in cutting edge technology to elevate education. So definitely, apart from all the other hurdles, investment, surprisingly, is still a major challenge that everyone faces today.
Yeah.
Great. So yeah, move on to Julian. So would like to hear your thoughts on the challenges that you've seen throughout your entrepreneurship journey. What do you think are some of the challenges or hurdles that prevents education from developing as fast as other industry?
Question. I would say, first of all, that there's a very, very, very large gap between how universities like to do business, or educational institutions in general, and how startups need to do business. So for us, it's time we're buying, right? If we're raising another funding round of 1 or 2 or 3 million, doesn't really matter, but you just buy some time to show your product works, and then that it actually needs to be in this world. For example, when I deal with universities, then we're having a great conversation. Say, like, okay, we're on board. This is perfect. Let's continue. Let's do this. Let's get to better. Let's get back quickly, and let's decide on the final point. And then we all look at our agendas, and I say, like, okay, I could do like tomorrow morning 8:30 to 9:15. How's that? And they would say, oh yeah. We're also thinking about doing something on the short term, so we can schedule something within 6 weeks. So it's such a different line of thinking how tech companies need to work and how institutions work. There's a huge skin in the game for tech companies to survive. You need to do business quickly. You need to be able to survive. A lot of institutions are public funded, so there's less skin in the game. So it has a very big, it's a different line of thinking, which is all right. Like, I don't think it would be a good thing if only edtech kind of people would be in universities. Like, I don't think that would like solve education. But that's something I'm noticing myself, that there's a very big difference over there. And then again, like also within institutions, it sounds strange, but sometimes there are different factors which determine what kind of educational system is there within the university, right? There's the success of the students, but that doesn't need to be their core focus, which also complicates stuff. It's a political game, and it's always a difficult one. There's really good stuff happening also in the Netherlands. So for example, below 50K, it's really easy to start up pilots now. So there are changes, and there are a lot of good people like working on it. But we have just because this whole sector is so traditional, I think we're like 10 years behind. But yeah, if we work together, we can speed it up a little bit, probably.
Yeah, thank you. And then I think for a lot of people in a lot of countries, that education is fall upon on government. So government should be responsible for providing a good education, cheap education for a wide variety of people. And we all know government function in a very slower pace comparing to tech companies. So that, as you said, contribute to some of the hurdles that a tech company experience. And I know that Julian, you're involved in, not Julian, Jerome, you're involved in European Edtech alliances. Can you maybe talk a little bit about the organization, maybe how that organization can bridge some of the government or societal hurdles that you have experienced?
Yeah, we try. So I'm a member of, and I'm taking part in the startup task force of the European Edtech Alliance, and I just wanted to advertise it quickly here for all educational startups and scale-ups, all edtech companies, big and small. There's the European Edtech Alliance, and you can become a member of that through your local organization in France, in Netherlands, or in each country in Europe, including the UK. And I think it's a really important organization because some of the problems that we've all mentioned here are common for all startups and scale-ups. And not only is it nice to cry on each other's shoulders about all these things, which is also useful, but it's also good to have, maybe a sort of it sounds awful, but call it maybe a lobby that represents you to national governments, but also to European governments to maybe change a few things, maybe make it a bit easier for startups to get into contracts with those mistrusting schools. Maybe make sure that the privacy laws are all aligned within Europe, so you don't have to go at each school and rewrite your GDPR documents. All those things, we try to help each other. We also try to help startups and scale-ups get access to more financing. Like sometimes, there are investors and other financiers within Europe. And if you're maybe you're in Belgium, maybe you don't know this financer that is actually open to your kind of solutions in Spain. And we try to channel all those things and create a lot of exchange between companies, between investors and companies, between public organizations and companies. So that's just my pitch for European Edtech Alliance. Become a member and get yourself on the map as well. Important. Be seen.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that information. I think it might be helpful to some of the audience that we have. They're thinking about dealing with some public sector stakeholders in that tech field. Given that we have 11 minutes left, I would like to switch gears to address some of the questions come from the audience. I'm just going to summarize the questions based on topics because we have several questions that were addressing similar ideas. So first question is on leveraging technology to help educations. So the question is about concerns around learner getting addicted to the technology side, for example, using TikTok or toys or videos, those media to enhance education experience. But in the end, there might be a risk of children's or students actually get addicted to digital tools and ignore the core concept of learning. And I'm wondering if the panelists can address your thoughts on that. How do we prevent technology overshadow the main goal of education?
I mean,
Can I jump in on this one? Oh, sorry. Please go ahead.
I'll just take the perspective from the early childhood side. So it's really about balance, because on one hand, you want to develop digital literacy, but on the other hand, you need to limit screen time and be mindful of it. And so in this specific case, it's really not as much about all the activities being online. So from our side, what we do provide is a breadth of activities that happen offline using materials at home. So not necessarily depending on having a digital screen being present even when doing the activity. In this specific case, it's really about having the web app in the specific case act as a stopwatch. It's really just more about an indicator of where you are and where you stand, rather than it being the dominant force in the engagement itself. So I think that's something that's quite important, especially in the context of early childhood development, because you just want to use it when it makes sense, when it feels right, and when it's done in a mindful way. And yeah, so that would be my take on that.
Yeah, striking a balance between having fun and the main learning goal is definitely important in the new edtech world. Another question related to this topic is on deep thinking. So is there any technology any of the panelists know that focus on deep thinking and concentrations through education?
I saw this question, which is super good, actually. I wanted to answer the question in a different way. I think the main question we should all ask is how the world will look like in 20 years with like the smartest people in the world basically working at companies who are selling consumer goods. So like companies like TikTok, companies like Instagram, like they're all like they're very bright minds working there to keep you hooked on their product, right? So I think the challenge for education over there is, since we know we have such a setback on the technology side, like how in God's name are we going to compete with that? Because I think it's utopian to think that our brains will forever stay the same and they will be still very interested in reading long pieces, although everything around us becomes quicker, shorter, faster. So we do like there's a huge challenge of actually indeed enabling that critical deep thinking, because I am completely I don't know who wrote the statement, Stefano, but I'm completely with you that it's very that it's alarming if people can't normally read or like get really into text or really into information bytes anymore. Then we get like a super superficial way of thinking for everyone. But what we try to do is to on one way spark people their interest in a low barrier way, so people don't open their books on a random topic very easily and go sit down for 3 hours, but they can listen to a fragment of 10 to 15 minutes. If they find it interesting, they can dive into it. So I think you need to enable more of those kinds of initiatives, so it's you just becomes low barrier for future generations to learn something, and then if it sparks their interest, you need to enable a deep dive.
Mm-hmm.
And just to add to that, I think Yumna also said it very well. It's about the balance, right? Like no one solution is going to solve everything. Where none of us have the silver bullet in the house. And for some environments, what Julian is proposing with his company is super enriching for a lot of people learning certain content. And for others, you're going to have to still, I mean, a student of law will need the skills to understand and analyze and also write larger pieces of text. I mean, it's just part of the job. So you will never be able to cover everything in TikTok-sized pieces of content. And there's I would say, we shouldn't ignore the ethical side of it. Do we? But I think that's also mentioned. Do we really want our total attention span for everyone with everything to be 8 seconds? I'm not sure if that's a healthy prospect, but for a lot of content learning, it's super useful.
And if I may build on that, I mean, for example, of some of the skills that we're trying to build and nurture around that independent play enables is this idea of being comfortable being with yourself for a specific period of time, because it enables you to develop your creativity further, your problem solving skills, like all of these things. There is also a benefit in just trying to build and nurture those skills back or into, no matter the age at which you're at. We kind of lost potentially track or sight of the importance as well of being able to focus on one thing for a specific period of time. But like the rest of the panelists suggested, is that it's really about where you start and getting initiated to it and just building on that over time. If you're comfortable listening to something for 15 minutes at first and then it goes into something bigger, then start with the 15 minutes, and it's really about where you start and building on that.
Yeah, that is a great answer. I think after all, technology is an enabler for better learning. It shouldn't be replacing learning. So the end goal is still better learning, better quality of getting the knowledge, and technology should be playing the role as a enabler, the helper, facilitator, and and we should not be forgetting about the mission of education. Lastly,
and one of the missions of education is about strengthening society, right? Strengthening, maybe even democracy, to be ambitious. And for that, we also need to be able to, sometimes we need a larger attention span, for example, of an hour, like in this session.
Yep, definitely.
So we need to train that.
It's a good training.
Yeah, just like as we're approaching the end of the session, there was one question kind of can serve a nice ending. It is about for people who already have great access to education, for example, NCS students, for example, students who go to great schools. How can the society do to help them realize that not everyone is privileged as they are, and what they should do to contribute to create a more balanced and equal education environment for all? Any suggestion from the panelists to help privileged people like me and some of my fellow students to spend more time thinking about the bigger social problems?
Go out there and see for yourself.
Culture thing. Yeah, but it's also a culture thing, right? If everyone, it's very easy, like we're also, like it's quite an elitist discussion we're having today, right? Like, so how can we improve stuff? How can we, but the first of all, like, is to actually make sure that people get access to education, get that. I think the challenge over there for a school like yours is that it should be in the culture to do good and not, in my opinion, for example, like graduate, have a great like pair of brains, like have a lot of knowledge, cool connections, everything, and then go work at a private equity firm. Like to be completely honest, like spend your especially when you're in your 20s or 30s, when you're young, or like spend those years very, very carefully, because those are, you can bring crazy changes to the world by, you don't need to work in a startup, but work at a company who does good, who tries to change something, who does climate, who tackling climate change or education, or but that's a culture thing within a university which should be there, and it has to do with role models, to do with how people talk to each other. And it's not cool to work at some boring company which does nothing good to the world, but it's cool to work at a company which actually helps people or feeds people or gets children education.
Yep, nicely said.
In my case, I think a low-hanging fruit is that these graduates go back to work afterwards, usually. And they're going to be working for whichever company they work for. They're going to be engaging with working parents. The employers will be welcoming new parents back to the workforce as well. And it's really about trying to find ways to shape different solutions and benefits and perks to help parents navigate through that, and accessibility, because you can be working for large organizations and they have parents that have different socioeconomic backgrounds, and really helping them navigate through that, because access to childcare services is tough, especially in the earlier years where there is a less dependency on schools to occupy that whole time frame and that whole routine. So really trying to see where you can influence and how to influence your employers and the workforce in order to empower parents further in their journey, because they do tend to find themselves in tricky situations after having their first child.
Yeah, definitely well said. And I think supporting parents is also a great way to support education as a whole. So yeah, thank you for mentioning that unique perspective. So given the time, we are approaching the end of the session. So I would like to give another round of thanks to our panelists for spending the hour with us and sharing their experience and thoughts on Edtech. And I hope with this session and the great discussion we had today, more people will be aware of the changes and the work that forefront fighters in the education space are doing, and maybe motivate them to spend more time and devote more effort into helping shape the future of education. And in the end, I think we do have a feedback link that will be shared to all the participants after the after the call is ended. So feel free to leave your comments, thoughts for a session. And a quick reminder, in 15 minutes, we'll have another session talking about new business model for a sustainable economy. So please stay in tune if you're interested in sustainable economy and development. We have a good line of sessions scheduled and planned for all of you. So again, thank you very much for coming today, and thank you very much for the panelists for sharing their insight with us.
And thank
Have
you
a
for
great
the great
Thank you for
moderation.
moderating.
Yeah,
Thank you.
you did a great
Thank
job.
you so much. Yes.
Bye everyone. Enjoy your day.
Nice meeting all of you.
Have a great day.
Thanks. Bye.